Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I request you to please take your seats so we can begin the evening. Okay, namaste. A very warm good evening to all our guests and distinguished members assembled here. My name is Murli Gopalan, and I'm the host for the evening. I'm also the Joint Secretary for Vishwa Adhyayan Kendra, and it is indeed my privilege to be here in front of you and compare this event today. And a really great pleasure to welcome you all to the 14th Laxmanrao Bhide Memorial Lecture. Let me start the evening with a very brief background of who we are and why we are here. Vishwa Adhyayan Kendra, or the Center for International Studies, also called VAK in short, was established in 1997 as a registered non-profit, non-political, and non-governmental voluntary organization dedicated to articulating and promoting an India-centric view. Our mission is to be a prominent center for study of world affairs with an India-centric perspective, and more importantly, disseminate an independent, alternate worldview. One of the other missions that we have is to reach out to people of Indian origin across the world, to help them work together and with local communities, and to help achieve the ultimate goal of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. VAK has played a very key role in hosting international events like the International Conference for Elders of Ancient Civilization, conducting outreach programs to engage with students of various countries across continents. We also do a lot of programs with the local universities, for example, with the Mumbai University and other universities. Apart from collaborating with the educational institutions to conduct special programs and competitions, seminars and panel discussions, VAK also has conducted study tours, exchange programs with Southeast Asian countries to help the diaspora in preserving their Indian connect. VAK annually conducts 2 lecture programs. One is today's event, which is the Laxmanrao Bhide Memorial Lecture, and the other one is the Universal Brotherhood Day, usually held in the month of August or September every year. You'll surely find a lot of more information on vakmumbai.org, our website. Coming to the reason why we are here, late Shri Laxmanrao Bhide was a New Age missionary of Bharat who traveled extensively to over 50 countries and organized the Indian community and championed the causes of the PIOs across 5 decades. He was instrumental in setting up the Friends of India Society International, which fought for democratic rights during the dark period of emergency in 1975-77. He played a very significant part in influencing the government of India to take up the cause of PIOs and NRIs, who were not seen as assets for Bharat at that time. This recognition of their roots, their participation in the Bharatiya growth story, resulted in what is very famous today as the annual Pravasi Bharatiya Divas, celebrated by the government of India over the past nearly 2 decades. As a tribute to the work of Shri Laxmanrao Bhide and to commemorate his pioneering works in connecting with and organizing the PIO community, VAK has also instituted a Bharatvanshi Samaj Bhushan Puraskar in association with Keshav Srishti, our co-host today, to honor silent and selfless workers whose efforts have nurtured the Indian diaspora in many ways. The Laxmanrao Bhide Memorial Lecture, held every year in January, we are a week late this year, held in January every year, has had eminent personalities from different walks of life, ranging from Sri K. Sudarshan Sri Ram Madhav, Dattatreya Hosbole, Sheshadri Chari, Swapan Das Gupta, Ajit Ranade, Nalin Kohli, and Professor Anirudh Deshpande. This year, the lecture is a joint effort between VAK, Keshav Shrishti, who are the normal hosts every year, but we also have the SP Mandli this year, and through the V School, where we are today, and I'm sure that it will be a resounding success. To begin with proceedings for the day, for the evening rather, I now request our dignitaries to come on stage and light the ceremonial lamp. Okay, and can I ask Nilesh ji, Umesh ji, and Narasimhan ji to this side? So, both of the side. It is a mark of our culture and tradition that we start the proceedings of any event with an invocation to the Supreme Power. As a philosopher once said, the function of a prayer is not to influence God, but to change the nature of the one who prays. So I now call upon Master Naren to recite a short prayer. Naren, thank you.
It is said that well begun is half done. Taking the name of the Almighty will certainly result in the success of such an enlightening program. So here are some shlokas from the Vishnu Sahasranama. Shuklam Bharadaram Vishnum Shashivarnam Chaturbhujam Prasannavadanam Dhyayeta Sarva Vighnopashantaye Gurur Gurutamo Dhamas Satya Satya Parakramah Nimisho Nimishasragvi Vachaspatiruddharadihi Vaikunta Purushaha Pranaha Pranadha Pranava Prutuhu Hiranyagarbha Shadrugno Vyapto Vayu Radhokshajaha Bhagavan Bhagahanandi Vanamali Halayuda Adityo Jyotiraditya Sahishnur Gadisattama Shrida Shrisha Srinivasa Srinidhi Shri Vibhavanaha Sridhara Shrikara Shreya Shriman Lokatrayashrayah Udirna Sarvatas Chakshu Ranisha Shashvata Sthira Bhushayo Bhushano Bhutir Shoka Shokanashanaha Vanamali Gadi Shangi Shanki Chakri Chanandaki Shriman Narayano Vishnur Vasudevo Bhirakshatu Artha Vishannaha Shitilascha Bhita Ghore Bhucha Vyadhishu Vartamanaha Sankirtya Narayana Shabdamatram Vimutta Dukha Sukhino Bhavantu Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu Sarve Jananam Sukhino Bhavantu.
Can I now request Narasimhan ji to please felicitate Nilesh Okji? Can I request Ajay ji to please come on stage and felicitate Umesh Dhruv ji? Umesh ji. Thank you, Ajay ji. Did you know that as per the Julian English calendar, extended into the past, the passing away of Bhishma was on 31st of January, 5560 BCE. Just saying that gives me goosebumps. Okay, but thus we were celebrating 7580th Punya Divas of Bhishma Nirvana just a few days back. How do you calculate that? 5560 plus 2020. So that's 7580. I know with this person sitting behind me, I shouldn't get into this area. But did you also know that Bhishma was on a bed of arrows? Now, this is obviously based on some 20 plus astronomy and chronological references from the Mahabharata text for more than 92 days. We always thought, or I always thought, that by the time that the Mahabharata war ended, he was already dying, and then maybe a couple of days later, he passed away. We didn't know, or rather I didn't know, that he was alive for 92 days after that, and then during that time, he also had a lot of other work that he had completed. Okay. Now, this is one other thing. What if I told you that there was no ice age, at least not in India, at least not for the last 150,000 years? But I thought I and my children and my ancestors were always taught that there was an ice age. But finally, if you had to put a date to Rama, or a birth date to Rama, and what we usually call Ram Navami and things like that, Rama was born. So we don't have a date. I thought we had Ram Navami around April, right? So if you were to look at a Julian calendar reference, Rama was born on 29th of November, 12,240 BCE. Now, to be frank, to those who have been interested in India, Bharat culture, Bharatiya culture, Indic literature, Indology related stuff, our keynote speaker today needs no introduction. Nilesh holds a bachelor's and master's degree in chemical engineering and an executive MBA. He's interested in astronomy, archaeology, geology, genetics, quantum mechanics, economics, and there's still two more, okay? Ancient narratives and philosophy. To be frank, I don't know if I've missed a few. Maybe when we hear him, we'll know about that. He's currently the adjunct assistant professor at the School of Indic Studies, Institute of Advanced Sciences, and the principal and co-founder at Bima LLC. Having graduated from Amchi Mumbai UD he began his career in the US with GE after completing his post-graduation, going on to become an exceptional trainer, mentor, facilitator, and coach in Lean Six Sigma. Having published his first book, When Did the Mahabharata War Happen? The Mystery of Arundhati, in 2011. His second book, The Historic Rama, was published in 2014. And his third one, Bhishma Nirvana, from where the few anecdotes that I picked up came from, in 2018. Now, just to take a small detour, there's a bookstall out there, there's books that are available, and if you want it autographed by him, it's possible and you can get it done. The meticulous research of his books decisively falsifies all existing claims whilst taking us to an exciting tour from the present into the past. Not just the past, into remote antiquity of human civilization. And it's a must read for anybody who's interested in Indian literature, in Hindu civilization and Indian literature. In his book, The Mahabharata, he freshly evaluated astronomy observations from the Mahabharata text. This work led to the validation of 5561 BCE as the year of the Mahabharata war, while falsifying more than 120 claims. The book was nominated for the Lakatos Award. The award is usually given every year by the London School of Economics for contribution to the philosophy of science. In his second book, he decisively falsifies many timelines proposed by many people of 7,300, 5,200, 10,000, 1,500 BCE to prove that Rama was around 12,200 BCE. What excites me most about Nileshji's work, I've read 2 books now, is with the help of extremely accurate and corroborating references, he gives us enough ammunition to go against almost all traditional information that we've been given in terms of our civilizational development. So I guess it's after today, after listening to him, we'll probably be ready to rewrite a few history books. Finally, before I hand him over to you, I would like to point out that there will be a small Q&A session at the end of Nileshji's speech. You have a small counterfoil of the registration form that you filled outside. I request you to please write your question on that, relevant to today's topic. And preferably just one question, so we can handle as many questions as possible. And then at the end of the speech, I can shoot it at him. Now, without further ado, I invite our keynote speaker for the 14th Laxmanrao Bhide Memorial Lecture, Shri Nilesh Nilkanth Oak, to take us through his views of what India taught the world, the past, present, and the future. Nilesh Oak.
Yeah, okay. All right. If you can start, I'll continue speaking, okay? It came on. There we go. Okay, the magic of technology. Okay. The topic given to me, what India taught the world, past, present, and future. For most part, I'll talk about the past. If you understand the past, then it's easy to talk about the present and the future. Einstein's relativity theory tells us that, no matter where you start, how you solve the equations of the tensors and relativity equations, actually it doesn't distinguish between the past, present, and the future. Okay, the past gets repeated in future, and if we don't want the mistakes to be repeated, then we have to learn the lessons. Otherwise, it just repeats. Let's see how it works. Okay, so this is a long list here, if you can see, and I'm not going to walk you through all the list, but these are some areas. In fact, the list is not exhaustive. These are some of the areas where India has contributed immensely to the world's knowledge, okay, to the knowledge of India itself and the world's knowledge. Can everyone hear me well? Okay. What has happened over time is some of these names that if you see them, that we have actually, for practical purposes, we have lost it. We just don't know what it means. Okay, it's almost like based on a shraddha that, there may be few practitioners, but mostly it's a hearsay. For example, I'm going to remove some of these. Say Mantra Shastra, that's what I removed. Okay, so we hear about it. There are mantras that we know, but as to a very effective use of them, how many of you here can say, oh, I'm an expert in Mantra Shastra? Okay, if we have one, actually it would be very exciting for that person to come here and take us through, for the rest of the evening. That actually stands for many other things. For example, science of Astra and Shastra. In our ancient Indian narratives, few things I want you to take away at the end of the day. One thing is, when you discuss Indian narratives or Indian Grantha, whichever way it is, epics, Vedas, Upanishad, Puranas, whatever it is, and if you are used to, because of a bad education, if you are used to saying our mythology, it says blah, 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 stop saying it, okay? You don't use the word mythology because to you, it doesn't mean a big deal, and that's a good thing. But to the hearers, especially on the world stage, the global village, it means something very different. Okay? In the global stage, okay? So for example, history. So Bible is history. Until Darwin came into being, until Darwin's theory of evolution came, for the Western world, the history meant Bible. The Old Testament, New Testament, that's it. And it did not need a proof. There was no concept of a proof in that sense. There were some things in the Greek sciences, okay? And you will hear, you can see tons of books written on the Greek sciences. So there is some substance in it, like those of you who are into philosophy or science, Thales, Anaximander, and Xenophanes, and all that. Some wonderful work. But some of these I will share from an Indian tradition, and in front of that Indian tradition, some of these even Greek works, which I admire greatly, will actually appear puny and trivial. Okay, so when you look at philosophy or philosophy of science. I'm going to, what did I remove? Tantra Yukti, it will take a long time, okay? Whatever I am removing, just keep attention. Administration, here is a business school we are speaking. There are many others, that music, a subject by itself, and obviously I'm not expert at all on the music, other than I listen to classical music, Drupad and Khayal, and that's about it. I still haven't figured out when somebody says, oh, that Sa was very good and that Ma was good. I don't know what they're saying, okay? But there are some areas that I want to give you some highlights, okay? In fact, Murliji covered some of my work of last 25, 30 years in such a quick fashion, nice fashion, that in principle we can get into questions and answers, but I want to cover some of the contributions of India. So these are some of the areas I'm going to touch base, okay? One of the biggest thing, and tell me if you're hearing this for the first time, but the India's contribution to India itself, of course, and the world, is the very concept of science as religion. And of course, I'm forced to use some words, because if I'm speaking in English and you are listening to it in English, we are stuck with some of the words, okay? In fact, the translation can be dharma. You understand? So I'm not saying science as dharma. Science as religion, in the traditional sense that we hear, okay, that we understand in English, is dharma. Now, is it always practiced like that? Not necessarily. Okay, there are lots of dogmas, there are lots of confusion, lots of andhashraddha, shraddha. There is no difference, as I always emphasize. There is no difference between shraddha and andhashraddha. They are the same thing, okay? They're just like believing in something, assuming something to be true. That's what it means. Like, how many of you think Newton is a great scientist, or Newton was a great scientist? Most of you, yeah? Right. But how many of you have actually studied his works to see why it is great? Many of the scientists that I come across, and sometime, I will ask this question. I don't ask in a sarcastic sense, but some people will say, oh, I'm totally inspired by so-and-so. And then usually I ask them, okay, could you summarize for me, what is it that inspired you, or what is it that he or she did? And, social media, my experience is they block me. Okay, I just asked a very simple question, just trying to enlighten myself. So science as religion. Now, not many people understand this, especially or unless you have studied the Western history, especially Western European history, especially after the European Renaissance, the whole struggle, and even before, the Dark Ages, they call it Dark Ages, okay? The whole struggle was between science and religion. Okay, and that's where these whole other words, secularism, separation of state and church, even for administration purposes, everything came into being. Indian tradition did not have that. Now, that is not to say that there were no problems. I'm not saying that. But as a philosophical basis, as a cultural basis, that was not the issue. And I'll show you the proofs of that. Now, if you want to think of what is science, so science is so this is from Stephen Jay Gould. How many of you have heard this name, Stephen Jay Gould? Punctuated equilibrium, after Darwin. He took Darwin's theory to, at Harvard, Darwin's theory to the next level. Very, very wonderful works, lots of books, meant for a common audience. I would encourage you to read them. He says science is an integral part of culture. It's not this foreign thing done by an arcane priesthood. It's one of the glories of the human intellectual tradition, okay? And what does science supposed to do? Develop technology, address societal issues, build knowledge, inform policy, satisfy curiosity, solve everyday problems. That's what science is supposed to do. What is dharma? Okay, now if I give my definition, you may not agree. So I said, let's go to Wikipedia. Okay, so Wikipedia, just a summary, says in Hinduism, for example, dharma signifies behaviors that are considered to be in accord with Ruta, as it Rutam Vachmi, Satyam Vachmi, the order that makes life and universe possible, and includes duties, rights, laws, conducts, virtues, and right way of living. Now, we hear a lot in the Indian context about Varna, Ashrama, and then it gets into the caste and whatnot. For example, if you look at Bhagavad Puran, Bhagavad Puran, people immediately think Krishna Katha and that's it. Yes, there is so much more to that than Krishna Katha. For example, Bhagavad talks about in America, in India, we are so used to, in the political sphere, a common minimum program that has become a reality for last many years, right? Bhagavatam talks about a common minimum program for all Varnas. All Varnas and also then all ashramas also. What is that common minimum program for all Varnas? Ahimsa, we have heard that. Satyam, Asteya, Akama, Krodha, Lobhata, which means Akama, Akrodha, Alobhata. Bhutapriya, Hitehacha, Dharmoyam, Sarva Varnika. This is a common minimum program for all Varnas. Everyone has to be Ahimsa, follow Ahimsa, right? And then that is same thing for ashram also. Sarva ashrama prayuktoyam, niyamah kulanandana, madbhava sarva bhuteshu. This is Krishna telling Uddhava. Madbhava sarva bhuteshu, mano vak kaya sanyama. So in any ashrama you have to do it. It's not only the brahmacharya ashram or so on. Okay. So this is a common minimum program. Now, the concept of Atma, everyone has that. This is a hypothesis if you don't believe it. In fact, Shankaracharya said, somebody asked him, how do you prove that Atma exists? I don't, the person said. And he said, it is proved by your denying it. Okay? It is proved by your denying it. If you accept it, it is proved by your accepting it. Which is what? The Vichar Swatantriya. So if you have to summarize the Dharma, it's a Vichar Swatantriya. Okay? The conviction in that Niti Dharma that I just explained as a Varna or Ashram. Okay? And then the eternality of Atma. That's the assumption. If you have these three assumptions, no God, no particular, any specific sadhana, none of it actually figured into it. Okay? Those are the three basic tenets. So we go with the tenets and then you have a body and there is an Atma inside. So you as an individual human being, now if there were no other people, you might say life would have been nice, right? No fighting. Yeah. But you also want a company. So that's individual. If you take many of these packets of Atma in a body, then you have a society. And once you have a society, once you are yourself, if you go to the Upanishad, it says Annam Brahmeti Vejanat. You see that into not just limited to human beings, all living entities. Prano Brahmeti Vejanat, Mano Brahmeti Vejanat. That's the evolution. That's the evolution of a psyche. Okay? So when we think of Rigveda, what do we think? Like some sukta, what are they? Okay, if you have a sleeping problems, get a copy of Rigveda, start reading at the bedtime. You'll get a good night's sleep. If you don't have a context, it's extremely boring text. If you don't have a context, it's extremely boring text. If you have a context, it is extremely exciting text. Okay? What I'm quoting here, if you can see it, that's from Rigveda 8 Mandala 66, 14 Sukta or 14 Rik. Tvanno asya amate rutakshudo abhishaste ravasprudi tvanna uti tava chitraya diya shiksha shachishta gatuvita. It sounds like something interesting. Okay, all right, that's good. Like a Purusha Sukta, sounds like Purusha Sukta. I presented a paper in Boston showing that how these two lines has the entire pedagogy picture. What is the role of a teacher? What is the role of a student? What should be the syllabus? How the student should be tested? How the teacher should be tested? What things should be taught? What things should it be pull versus push? Like, should you force it on a student or you let student decide? What should be the criteria? I'm not going to go through that, but in a simple language, words, for example, amati, kshudha, abhishastu. like roti, kapda, makan kind of deal. Okay, so amati is ignorance. Hunger is a kshuda, everyone knows it. We feel it, what, 3 times a day? Yeah, if you're on a Dikshit diet, then you feel twice a day, something like this. And then a disease or epidemic. Abhishastu literally means like a sharp curse. But that's converted to like you're not feeling well, something must be happening, so that's in the sense disease or epidemic. What is the solution to that? The solution to that, of course, the ignorance has to be countered by wisdom. Hunger has to be countered by sustenance, food, okay? And disease by health. These were some of the basic subjects of Rigveda, the basic text. And then, of course, beyond these basic needs, you also need a philosophy to work with that ignorance and wisdom issues. So, logic of scientific discovery. As I said, I claim that it is a science. India's contribution is science as religion. So, this is India's contribution. If somebody asks you, where did the science begin? What would you say? Not because now I said, okay, this is India's contribution. Before this, or what did you study in your school? Where did science begin? Anyone? Okay, maybe there are no science students in the auditorium. Okay, yeah, so therefore, right? I mean, so, yeah, that's all we know. We don't know where it began, right? Maybe you missed a few pages of the textbook. Okay, usually you will hear, the original thing came from a Greeks. That's what you will hear. Okay, science, Pythagoras, Thales, Anaximander, and so on, and that's fine. But if you look at what the scientific framework is, you will find most elaborate discussion of it in the Shad Darshanas of India. Okay, philosophical discussion. I have not seen. That's not to say that it doesn't exist. If someone bring it, I welcome it. I eagerly look forward to it. I have not seen a better, exhaustive, interesting, intricate discussion of what scientific method is anywhere else. Okay? And for example, those of you who are maybe into the philosophy of science, Sir Karl Popper, if you have heard the name, okay? I'm a student of Sir Karl Popper for 30 plus years. Okay? I read it every day like a Bhagavad Gita. Okay, and even then, it's amazing. I love it. But even then, if you read Shad Darshanas, you get many insights every day that are really mind-boggling. Okay, so you have the 5 elements of a scientific method in the middle, but there is something more that you require, like a Tarka Shastra, logic, because that's not enough. Okay, you can make mistakes, how you draw inferences, and you can see that every day, every time a new evidence comes to the fore in India. The next day, if you read the newspaper articles, you know how wrong inferences they draw from the data that shows up. If you, how many of you are familiar with the Rakhi Gadi paper that came up, and a big deal about Aryan invasion, now does it exist or it doesn't exist, it totally destroys and all that. Read that paper again and see if some of these problems that I'm bringing it to your attention, if you see them. Okay, so the research is good, the data is good, but the inferences are disasters. There are conflicting inferences in the same paper, if you read that paper again. So this is the logic of scientific method or logic of scientific discovery. Now, Sir Karl Popper says, it's a triangulation of explanation, prediction, testing in the context of a theory, in the context of a background knowledge. Many times we hear something in English, we feel good. Okay, this sounds good. Okay, now if you hear that in a Sanskrit, for example, Patanjali saying Pratyaksha Anumana Agama Pramanani, or Gautama says Pratyaksha Anumana Upamana Shabda Pramanani. Many times we don't understand what is that said, so we said, okay, let's just do Namaskar. Something of that effect. But actually they are saying exactly the same thing or better. One of the problems that India faces, I'm talking of us, okay, us as Indians. We are prone, this is our own criticism, guys, okay, our own criticism. We are prone to do this. If we read somewhere, I go give these lectures around India, around the world, and this happens all the time. People will say, but I read somewhere, or it is written in this Purana, okay, so what is your opinion, or how do you say that that is not the case? When you read something, that is a Padadnyan at the bottom, okay, you simply read something, you understood it. Okay, you understand in the context, which is a Padartha Smaran, and from that you get the meaning of that sentence, that's a Shabda Bodh. But from Padadnyan, that you read something somewhere, all the way to Pratyaksha Jnana, which Indian system considers the highest. Pratyaksha Jnana is the highest. Mahabharata has many statements. It says even the Anuman, even Anumiti, even Shabdabodh, everything is actually Pratyaksha Jnana. Why? Because you might be reading it, but it was somebody's experience, and therefore it was encoded. Okay, so at the end of the day, Pratyaksha Jnana matters. So Padadnyan to Pratyaksha Jnana is a 11-step process. But many times what do? If we read somewhere in Purana, if we read in some Mahabharata, whatever, we say, okay, it's there, it's written, therefore it must be true. Nonsense. But such a detailed process is given. And as I said, even in the West, until Darwin came into being, the text, the Old Testament, New Testament was the history, was the truth. And they never thought any need to test any of it. Okay. I'll go fast through this because I'm going to show this slide again. What I just showed you, this Vidyan Buddhi, if you go through the Shat Darshanas, you can find the 11 elements of it. Again, the common sense, like separation, classification, distinction, sequencing, association, objective testing. But one very important thing I want you to see is a skepticism. You are expected to show skepticism towards, before accepting anything from anyone, but towards your own research. Okay, Sir Karl Popper says, if you are not critical of yourself and you write something, okay, if you are not critical on your own, then somebody else will do the job for you. They will be critical of your work. You have an expectation that you are skeptic of your own work. That is the expectation out of the Vijnana Buddhi or scientific acumen. And then logical reasoning. Again, I experience this all the time. I'm sharing it with you. In this front, by the way, the West, many times, not so much humanities, but the scientific community of the West does a phenomenal job when it comes to logical reasoning. They do a very impressive job that is sadly lacking in an Indian setup. So the top in the green, those are good things. Those are good things. We should do them. The one in the bottom, somewhat like a reddish color, those are the things that we should avoid. But you will see that those are what happens. Now what I'm saying, showing you is these are the contributions of Indian Shat Darshanas to the world. Okay? You can take these, you can bring any book on the philosophy of science or philosophy in general from anywhere else in the world and show me if they have a better discussion than what is done in, for example, Nyaya Darshana or Sankhya or Vaisheshika. Okay? Antiquity of Indian civilization, I will go fast through this. So this is my work of 30 years, quick summary. We start with today, 21st century. You go back to 2000 years. That 0 is what? Assumed birth of Jesus Christ. Okay, that's as a reference point. You go back, minus 5K, minus 10K, minus 10K, minus 5,000, minus 10,000, minus 15,000, minus 20,000 BCE. Muraliji summarized for us. I looked at all the evidence, astronomy evidence, and arrived at like a jigsaw puzzle fashion, 5561 BC for Mahabharata, ditto for Ramayana, using the evidence from Valmiki Ramayana, and then evidence from Rigveda. I showed that the oldest portion of Rigveda are definitely more than 22,000 BC, more than 24,000 BC. So what does it give you? It gives you a context. People say, how does chronology matters? I gave a talk in Thane this morning on the ancient Indian medicinal systems. And everywhere I showed why the chronology matters. Who did it first matters to understand how the development took place of medicine or of any other science. And I'll share a few. I work in consulting now on my own, and one of my wonderful friend, a British of British origin, with a good sense of humor and a attention to details. He said, Nilesh, that's good. This is very impressive. He has looked at all my works, but he said, you know what? For people, of course, in India, but even around the world, in order that they have a context to understand these 24,000. I mean, you are saying, okay, 24,000, so what? I don't know. I mean, in fact, I don't see any expression, so I don't know if I'm talking to myself. But, so he said, please put a dot on this timeline showing when did the European Enlightenment begin. Okay, so I asked him, he showed me, go to Wikipedia. It always has an answer, right or wrong. Okay, so that's the timeline. And what has happened is, actually, around that time, Sir William Jones came to Kolkata. Most of you know the history. He saw the similarity between European languages and Sanskrit. I won't go through that. And he proposed the theory, or people after him proposed the theory, so-called Aryan invasion theory. I call it Aryan invasion nonsense for a reason, because there is nothing scientific about it. None. Only there is a one thing, that is that we can give a benefit of doubt. And what is it? That Sir William Jones noticed the similarity between the languages of Europe and Indian languages or Sanskrit. That is true. Okay? But they couldn't even make a sense of the connection between the European languages until they ran into, anyone knows the answer? Panini. Only after the Panini's grammar, they suddenly could start making sense of the commonality of European languages. Okay? So Aryan invasion theory, I'm not going to spend time on this. So that is something we can blame the others for their dogma. You can call it Aryan invasion dogma. When the archaeology evidence came up, continuous civilization in India going back to what, 7000 BC, 9000 BC, they had to change this dogma from Aryan invasion to Aryan migration, because there is no evidence for invasion. These days, they are considering Aryan tourism. Okay? Now let's look at ourselves. Be skeptic to our problems. Okay? The Yuga dogma. The Yuga dogma goes on the two extremes. One is like, everything in India. If I ask you, if somebody from outside comes and asks you, how old is this how old is your Indian civilization? And I asked the same question when we were sitting outside. But if I ask you, what is the typical number that you will answer? Like, how old is Indian civilization? What do you read on Wikipedia? Anywhere, doesn't matter. 5,000. It's an extremely lazy number. It's an extremely tamasic number. There is no evidence whatsoever why it should be said as a 5,000. In fact, I am claiming here it's more than 24,000 years. Okay, now many times, of course, if you start telling that, and I want you to tell that to others, okay, so multiplication of 7, I say 7 times 1 is 7, 7 times 2 is 14, 7 times 3 is 21, multiply that by 1,000, so 7,000, 14,000, 21,000, Mahabharata more than 7,000, Ramayana more than 14,000, and oldest portion of Rigveda more than 21,000, if you can remember that. Okay, so that is something to say, but people will immediately ask you, what's your evidence? And they should ask you, now what are you going to do? Okay, many times the answer to a question is not an answer statement, it's another question. Okay, so you can do this. Somebody says, okay, so what's the evidence? I mean, who told you this? Then you say, have you heard Nilesh? Okay, send them my way. Thank you. Okay. The third one, this is also our problem, or at least I would call it a pro-India side problem. Now, most of us are so happy that we have gone out of this Aryan invasion nonsense, to the extent we are so happy that we are like a 5,000, we are so happy that we are a 7,000, 8,000, 9,000, that many of our good researchers are not willing to go beyond 8,000 BC. And why? I don't know what the answer is. Okay? Actually, we have evidence that takes us more than 24,000. I did not say 24,000 years. I said more than 24,000 years. We just don't have sufficient evidence. Okay, now here, how confident you should feel? Just as a reference point, and you have to take this on a Shraddha. Unless I have 100 data points to say even a single word, I don't say it. Okay, so you can feel very confident. Okay, so let's begin with that Amati Kshuda Abhishastu. Let's start with Kshuda. We need to feed ourselves, right? If your stomach is not filled, you won't listen to me. You'll go for a vada pav right away, outside. Okay, agriculture. How old is Indian agriculture, or how old you think is agriculture in the world? Throw some number that you've heard. 8,000 years, right? What? Any other number? No. Okay. So 8,000 even in India. We have that Lahurdev and whatnot, right? What if I tell you that there is a evidence of at least the harvesting of grains? Okay. We don't know whether they planted or not. So if everything is in abundance, like you just happen to go someplace and there are lots of mango trees, cashew trees, coconuts, you don't have to plant anything, but you have to pluck it. Okay? The evidence of harvesting, at least, it actually could be a agriculture plantation too. But harvesting, that we know for sure, this is peer-reviewed, those people who are stuck in peer-reviewed papers. Okay? This takes us back to 43,000 BC in Greater India. When I say Greater India, goes from Iran all the way to, say, Thailand or something like this. This is from Sri Lanka, going back to 43,000 BC. There is a evidence of settled agriculture, meaning when you look at the grains, you know that these are not wild grains. Okay, and I won't take you through the genetics of it, that will be subject by themselves. And if you're genetic experts, you can explore that. A firm evidence of agriculture-based civilization. Again, this is from Sri Lanka, going back to 16,000 BC, 18,000 BC. But we are still stuck in like 3,000, 4,000, or it came from Turkey, or it came from Iraq, and so on and so forth. That's just a quick on agriculture. Now, navigation. Let me ask you, if you go back, like forget latest technology, but let's say you go back 500 years or 300 years, okay? Who you think, just based on your limited knowledge, might be very good in terms of building boats, like sea-going boats around the world? Say 300 years ago. Greece, okay? India, okay, those people who said India, they are correct. They get 20 points, okay? Actually, shipbuilding was well-established craft at numerous points along the Indian coastline, and this is from Wikipedia, so you don't have to trust me, okay? Even Wikipedia, doesn't go, I mean, sometime it does a good job, okay? Arrival of Europeans, a significant factor, just like the cotton textiles and so on. The one point I want to make it is like ship constructed, so go the last line all the way. Number of ships constructed, of what size they were, and ships constructed at Bombay in its heyday were said to be vastly superior to anything built anywhere else in the world. Now this is just data, it is there. One day, one of my colleague is an engineer, and he builds his own thing, or he fixes his own car. Okay, I mean, America people love to do that. I don't know if you guys do it here. We outsource things, change the light bulb here, But he fixes it. He actually builds his own aeroplane. Okay, very good friend of mine that we'll go weekly for a lunch together. I said, still I won't sit in your aeroplane. Okay, but so he just one day came very excited and said, oh God, I didn't know this. And I'm saying, tell me please first and then be excited. So he said about this shipbuilding. And honestly, this is like possibly going back 10 years ago. I did not know that. So I said, where is it? Where can I find this information? And he says, Wikipedia. Okay, and then of course you can find as much information as you want from cross-references. But that's what it was. To the extent, just like British destroyed the textile industry of India for a reason, different things, they did the same thing to the shipbuilding industry. In fact, the Treaty of Nanking, if you have heard about it in 1842, was done with the shipbuilders of Bombay dockyard. And actually that shipbuilding existed all the way from Surat all the way down to Kerala. Okay, that was the shipbuilding industry. So now what are we talking? Agriculture. Okay, now so if you have excess agriculture, then we have to do the commerce and shipping. So navigation, okay. So if you want to do the commerce, then is there evidence of it? Now there is evidence of it from the land and there is evidence of it from the sea. What you're saying is not very obvious. It's a chart from a genetics paper, very recent genetics paper. Again, this is not a news to those who are in this field. This is a migration of cows. Our zebu cows, with a big hump, migration of cows. See, this is here India area, So anytime we see Iran, we say that's Iran. Okay. If you go back Mahabharata times, if you go back Ramayana times, you'll see the landscapes. Uttarakuru is even north of Iran. Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, all of those are Uttarakuru. Okay. And the Iran, all Afghanistan, those are Pakistan. Everyone knows Pakistan was India. Just checking, okay. So you see these migrations of cows from India area all the way to Europe. And in fact, if you look at the genetic data for the Taurus cows, the other ones, the Jersey, and what do you see? You see their origin comes from India. The domestication of cows happened in the greater Indian peninsula, and it goes back very, very old. I just want to take that as a homework for you, how old it is. But I'm saying after post-Mahabharata, you see these migrations. You see pre-Mahabharata migrations also. But if you're not convinced by this diagram, I think this will convince you. There are 3 varieties of domesticated mouse in the world. Okay, there are many, but these 3 are principal varieties. Okay, and if you wondered, and you are concerned, come on, India has to export something. Well, many years ago, India exported something to the world. The domestic mouse. There are 3 varieties. Now, If Indian writes it or if I write it, you say, oh, did you create this chart? No. This is a Bon Homme, the author, first author, paper written in 2006. Okay, they took samples of the mouse, the domestic mouse, domestic mice, all around the world. And what does it show? Starting from the epicenter of this mouse migration, okay, is India. And from every corner of the world, the mouse went from India. Now you say, okay, mouse is fine, but the Aryan still, no. Okay, okay. What is the significance of mouse migration? The domestic mouse migration. The domestic mouse is connected with agriculture. It's connected with a settled civilization, okay? So as those civilization or as the people moved, or through either commerce or through just the migration, that the mouse also went away with them, okay? Very, very significant evidence. And just as a timing, by the way, in genetics, there are no exact timings. These are estimates, but the estimates go back to 15,000 years ago, 20,000, 25,000, 30,000, and so on. Astronomy. Now you have agriculture and you have a navigation. To do both, you need astronomy. You need to know when to sow the seeds. You need to know when to harvest, when the rain would be the proper rain, okay? And to navigate, you need to know an understanding of the stars, okay? So that you are safe, you return safe with lots of money, hopefully, right? So astronomy. Now, how old is astronomy? Again, you can go to Wikipedia. This time you have to be careful. Okay, if you look at Surya Siddhanta, the Wikipedia will tell you that the Surya Siddhanta is only a 1500-year-old text. How many of you have read Burgess commentary? How many of you have heard Surya Siddhanta before? Some of you. How many of you have read commentary, like either Hindi or English? Burgess commentary? Nobody. I love this. I can bluff. Okay. Now, I'm just quoting from Surya Siddhanta from the 12th chapter, Atyasannatayatena Grishme Tivra Kararave Deva Bhage Suranam Tu Hemante Mandatanyata. This is the paper I presented, just Surya Siddhanta, at Oxford. What does it say? This verse, combined with few others, essentially this verse is saying the peak of Hemanta Rutu, which is what? From December 21st, go back 2 months. That total 2 months period is Hemanta Rutu. The peak of it, which is the center point of it, 1 month before 21st December, in those times, equivalent to that, was the apopsis, that is the position of the earth away from the sun. Because remember, everyone knows it's not exactly circular, it's elliptical. So position of it away from the sun was at a Hemanta, and the position of earth closest to the sun was at the peak of Grishma. If you want this situation, and there are 2 other references that I'm not going to talk about, you can go to YouTube and watch my video, Surya Siddhanta. This situation uniquely happens only once. If you go back, I'm just for the sake of it, I'm saying last 3 lakh years. You can go 10 lakh years and nothing changes. Only thing is our ability to simulate skies and trust them changes. Okay, if you go back, say, for 100,000 years, 200,000 years, there's only one time that all these 3 references can come together. I'll show you when they come together. But before that, what I just showed you the verse, if you visually see this, it can be shown like this. Are there any physics students here? Okay, well, no, the cheating is not allowed. These 2 guys even know the answer to that. It just so happens, Huh? Who said that? Okay, so guys, just can you stand there, please? Okay, just everyone slightly turn around and clap for him, please. Okay. Kepler's law. Essentially, it is said in exactly the same language. Okay, mandatanyatha, manda motion, shigra motion. Those of you in astronomy who know this. Okay, it's a Kepler's law. It's a representation of Kepler's law, just from the same verse. Now, if you have to bring those 3 references together, it says there was 2 pole stars, one in the north, one in the south. Right now, there is only pole star in the north, known as Polaris. But if you go back, because Earth's axis, you see that Earth's axis goes through a cycle called precession of the Earth's axis. It takes 26,000 years. If you want to match the peak of Hemanta, if you want to match the peak of Grishma, and you also want to match the obliquity, So Earth goes like this. It also does this, the nod, right? And so if you want to match those 2 plus what I just read before, those all 3 come together for 1 year. Now, when I say 1 year plus minus 50 years, 100 years, that's fine. The year is 12,000 BC. 12,000 BC. No ifs, no buts. Now, Again, samshaya, that's good. So somebody says, I don't believe that. I love that when they say it. But if you say, I don't believe it, that's not where it ends. That's where it begins. Okay? So now you have to just do some work. Okay? So this is coming together at 12,000 BCE. Now this is one that is made to Surya Siddhanta. But that's not the only correction. In fact, I'll show you against this grid. And what I'm trying to show you is I claim 24,000 years of history on totally different grounds, okay? On the Rigveda, internal evidence of Mahabharata, Ramayana. I'm showing you what is going on in parallel in the Indian civilization, okay? So if you go against this, when the Western researchers of Surya Siddhanta, when they said Surya Siddhanta is only 1500 years old, they were partly correct. Because one of the correction, it is the longitude corrections of the nakshatra. There are 27 or 28 nakshatras. That was made, that amounts to 580 CE. So approximately 1500 years ago. So they were right. But they were wrong that they just stopped there. There is a wonderful researcher. This is the one I showed you just now, 12,000 BC. That's my work and my co-researcher Rupa Bhatti. There's a wonderful researcher, Dr. Anil Narayanan. He used to work for ISRO. He was an ISRO scientist. Now he is in Washington, D.C. doing a consulting work. He has shown many other corrections. For example, he shows latitudes of nakshatras as given in Surya Siddhanta. And he did a brute force analysis, looked at 7 to 10 different factors that all possibly can vary. And it brings him to the time when those latitude corrections were made in Surya Siddhanta. The readings of latitudes in Surya Siddhanta takes you to 7,500 BCE. If you go back, another one, equation of the sun, the most accurate equation of the sun until last 200 years. I want you to repeat. Most accurate equation of the sun. What is equation of the sun? To predict the position of the sun in the sky at any location. The most accurate equation is in Surya Siddhanta, and it was the most accurate until last 200 years. And the one that we have today doesn't do any better job than what the Surya Siddhanta equation does. Okay? Again, you can be skeptic, you can test it if you like. There is another one, obliquity of the Earth's axis and some additional thing around 3000 BC. Possibly, this is the origin for what we hear, 3102 BC. Everyone hears in the Panchang and all of that. It was used as an arbitrary reference point. Nothing wrong with it. Just like we use Jesus' birth, 0, and life goes on. Which year you are born, 1982, 1972, whatever the number is. And nothing matters. It's a relative thing and we can use it. There is another correction that I showed from Mahabharata, but also connects with the Surya Siddhanta. Is the Abhijit, and why Abhijit was removed, when it was removed, what are some of the considerations. And there are in Mahabharata, if you know the Abhijit, fall of Abhijit, if you take my book, chapter 5 in Mahabharata book, Abhijit Spardhamanatu, Rohini, Kanya Shasvasa, there are 8 different things that have to match, and they all 8 match for one particular date, that's 14,500 BC. So just based on, like out of 500 verses of Surya Siddhanta, this possibly took maybe 20, 25 verses. And that shows us that Surya Siddhanta is at least as old as 17,500 years. Now, when you tell somebody, oh, I'm taking my car to garage, it needs some color, it needs some gearbox change and something like this, which means it is already old. Okay? It's already old. The very fact you do the correction to Surya Siddhanta, which means the corrections are required, which means it is much older than even 17,500. What I'm showing you is a consistency of that civilizational different aspects of it in the Indian context. For agriculture we talked about, for navigation, and now for astronomy. Ancient Indian medicinal systems. How many of you were present at my talk in Thane this morning? I know few, a couple of them. Okay, that's good. Okay, I'll go fast through this. You can, for others, you can check through that. Again, this is a system. In the morning, I covered like 3 case studies from the ancient Indian medicinal systems. One here in the very recent times, another one taking it back to Mahabharata, and third one to Ramayana. I'll quickly go through 2. Smallpox inoculation. If you hear that, immediately the name comes to your mind is, I'll give you the correct answer because everyone gives the wrong answer first time. They say Louis Pasteur. No, that's not the correct answer. Edward Jenner is the correct answer, right? So inoculation. And I'll show you what happened. Rhinoplasty, like plastic surgery, very sophisticated word. How many of you know that it started in India? In fact, it was made sophisticated, mastered in India. Okay, to the extent that the nose job, okay, the word around the world for that is called Indian flap. Okay, and if I have a picture, I'll show you why that is. And those of you, I mean, this is in Mumbai, so Maharashtra people should feel good. The way the knowledge went to the West, especially in the last 400 years, went from Pune. A Maharashtrian potter, Kumar or Kumbar, he performed a nose operation on the streets of Pune. Two medical men from Britain noticed it. They wrote about it in Royal Society Journal. And that's how the Indian flap went to Europe. There was no word rhinoplasty until then, So, and then Kumbhakarna, I'll skip that, okay, because I don't want you to sleep, okay. Modern Western claims, quickly. 1739, when Edward Jenner was born, okay, I'm just giving you the facts. He became a doctor, medical man in 1792. He started performing experiments. By 1796, he came up with a vaccination. The reason is called vaccination is because of cow, vaka, cow, okay. Now, against this, it's a well-known trend. How many of you know this? This is not a news to anyone. It should not be a news. There is a persistent pattern, not just in medicine, almost in every field. In Britons, the particular person wrote it Britons, it applies to mostly Western Europe. Scientific and industrial discoveries of the early 19th century, once a milestone was reached, details of the steps leading to it were removed. Eastern antecedents, either from India, China, Turkey, and so on, the discoveries were ignored or belittled, and modern science presented as a standalone without any prehistory. So it just started then, okay? In fact, when he came up with this vaccination, there was so much of ignorance in Europe that people did not accept it. So the cartoons like this came up. He said, if you take it, be aware, the cows may start coming out of your ears and eyes and nose and whatnot, okay? That's how it was. Now, even before him, there were attempts by many intelligent medical men from Britain or from Europe to take the Indian method of inoculation and take it to Europe. And some of them actually tried, but it did not succeed. European writers have written that there was a documented evidence of Indian inoculation, at least going as far back as 1500 BC, like even 200 years, 300 years before even Edward Jenner was born. Okay, now something more interesting. The European treated this as an inflammation of a skin. They did not make that connection with a viral infection. Okay, and therefore, how many doctors in the audience? Okay, and therefore they gave a mistreatment. They just treated that as a skin disease, and in the process, the patient died. Okay, now there were many attempts. For example, Dr. Robert Colt, he wrote from India, from Kolkata, the inoculation method in India, and he was encouraging British people or European people to use it. Now, very interesting, quick sidebar. Do you know who used it in Europe? Actually, some people did use it, but it was not the middle class. The very poor people who had no option, they used it just for survival. And the rich and aristocrats, they wanted to enjoy their wealth, so they did not care. They also took it. It didn't matter. The middle European class did not use it because they could not imagine a brown man teaching them something. You can see the documented evidence of it. They could not imagine this. Okay, there were many attempts, other attempts. Dr. Holwell wrote a big article. You can still read that article, Efficacy of Indian Inoculation. And those of you, it's a business school, Six Sigma, if you have heard about it, 1 in million defects. Holwell writes, the efficacy of the Indian method, the Vrindavan Brahmins or Banaras Brahmins, was so effective that he says he didn't say Six Sigma, but the rate he gives is better than Six Sigma. In fact, he says, this particular method is a godsend and is so useful to us, our people meaning British people in Kolkata. He said not a single person was lost of our people to inoculation because thanks to the Banaras Brahmins methods of inoculation. Okay. Now what is interesting and sad also, once the cowpox method of Edward Jenner came into being, I will not tell you the reason, take that as a homework. In 1802, the Indian method of inoculation was banned in Bengal, where British had control. Now, I'm not saying necessarily that is a completely bad thing, in the sense that Edward Jenner's method was very useful. I mean, a number of us went through that, so we are not denying that part. But a very effective method was banned for commercial considerations. Okay. Something very interesting. The Indian contribution, Indian origin, I mean, if I had a time, I would have gone more through it. There was also a Chinese method. They used to sniff it, like what you call the tapkir or whatever you call it. They used to sniff it. Now, in China, apparently, it might have worked, but when it went to Istanbul, it did not work for Istanbul folks. But the Indian method worked. In fact, India had a tradition in their family, when somebody has a smallpox, they will treat that person, but they will take a sample on a thread, and the thread was very carefully preserved as a culture until another outbreak came few years down the road. And as soon as they heard of an outbreak, that thread was taken, and many people in the family or someone in the family was trained how to administer to every family member. And that is also how it was done, and it's been documented. But you can see the denial of Indian origin of inoculation down to our times. At least I traced the last paper I traced in 2012. Some Western author absolutely denying that Indian had anything to do with the inoculation of smallpox, in spite of all this evidence. Quickly, Sushruta, I just already mentioned it. There was a 1794 when the potter in Pune performed the operation. Then the two British men wrote about it. It became a big craze. Okay, the books were written, lots of books. It was an Indian flap. They will take a piece like this and they flip it around a wax nose. The most important critical part is they will not cut this flap completely. They will keep it connected. So it's a living tissue, living skin. So it did not dry out. And then they will put the balm and medicines and so on, herbs and whatnot. And then very soon you have a functional artificial nose. Okay. Now it was translated into German. Then that's where the word rhinoplastic was coined, and it became a big thing. What is interesting is that 1794. This is if you see this, if you read it, and if you understand Sanskrit, that particular method. This is from Sushrut Samhita, is described in detail. Okay, exactly how to perform that nose operation or the nose plastic surgery. Okay, just slight difference. Here it suggests taking a flap from here and putting it here. The potter in Pune made an improvisation. He said, this is against the gravity, let's take it from here and put it down. So improvisation is allowed. Like, Yaskacharya says, Sanatano, the definition is Sanatano Nitya Nutana. Okay, something that you can refresh all the time according to time, place and circumstances. Okay, and your brain and a buddhi, Now, after 100 years, after this successful method, Indian flap system, this is what the British Medical Journal writes after 100 years. It says to criticize the subject matter of this work meaning Sushrut Samhita, in detail would be labor wasted. Its interest is rather antiquarian rather than scientific. He says, but a collection of complex farragos, prescribed farrations and whatnot, prescribed according to a fanciful and erroneous pathology is practically useless. Okay, I'll leave it to you to ponder over this. Okay, and I'll go fast through this. I have shown, and this my work exists on YouTube and even Oxford paper and Srijan talk, is what I've shown is through this. It's a triangulation of a different kind. Like you can start with the Sushruta Samhita references. You can look at the Garuda Purana genealogy, and you can look at the genealogy from Mahabharata of Sushruta and all. The common factors being Vishwamitra, Devarata, Madhuchanda, Divodas, and those are the family succession going backwards from Sushruta. And since I have established the timing of Mahabharata, and Mahabharata has Sushrut, and Sushrut is not the last person, there are many other persons, we can confidently say that Sushruta was definitely in 6 millennium BC or before, definitely more than 8,000 years. Okay, so that's how we can actually do it in a scientific fashion by triangulation. Okay, now quickly in terms of philosophy, we didn't talk much. How many of you have heard of Shad Darshanas? Just heard, Shad Darshanas, okay? Yeah, so what are they? I'm just giving a crude translation, so don't, get into picking the words and say that's not a correct translation. So if you start with Vaisheshika, that's like physics, okay? If you get into Nyaya, Vaisheshika Nyaya, that's logical analysis, Anvishiki, if you have heard the word. Epistemology, that's a Sankhya, okay, if you want to call it the basic knowledge, the fundamental knowledge, ontological, epistemological properties. Psychology, mind, that is a yoga, Patanjali's Yoga Sutra. Then Purva Mimamsa is a linguistics, how to understand linguistics. Those of you who are familiar with regression, most of you would be, regression, stepwise regression and all that. There is a wonderful statement in linguistics, because of time I'm not going there, into Purva Mimamsa. Okay, it does what to do to the language. It says if you have a sentence, long sentence or a sentence, and you want to find out the importance of each word, what it contributes to that sentence, he says this is how you do it. Every time remove one word and read the sentence and see what's the effect of it. Then put that back, take another word and see what happens, and so on and so forth. How beautiful. That is nothing different than stepwise regression. You can do that for an individual data point, you can do that to the individual variable, and so on. Okay, so the concepts exist, and then bringing it all together. This is my take on the Brahma Sutra, or the last one, the Uttara Mimamsa or Vedanta. The biggest thing is what? I'm going to quickly walk you through it. See the definitions of it. Vaisheshika Darshan, it says, what is dharma? It says, Yato Abhyudaya Nishrayasa Siddhi Sa Dharma. There is no conflict. I mean, in the Indian tradition, that is another contribution, there is no conflict. Okay, so are you doing this spiritual or are you doing this material? What are you working on right now? Material aspect or spiritual aspect? There is no distinction. Yato Abhyudaya Nishrayasa Siddhi Sa Dharma. Whatever you learn, that creates prosperity and the best that is possible. After prosperity, you also want something else. That will happen, and then people will realize it. Okay, or if you go to Nyaya Darshana, like there are 16 elements to look at. Some of those other things, it also tells you futilities and fallacies, how to recognize the fallacies. And if we don't understand it, lot of nonsense that goes into the Indian research things will continue. We have to learn Nyaya Darshana to recognize the fallacy. We have to learn Nyaya Darshana to recognize the futility. And you know what it says? Anytime someone makes a fallacious reasoning, the person needs to be rebuked. It doesn't matter who he or she is. And if that person does repeatedly, he or she should be removed from the discussion. They don't deserve it. That is Nigraha Sthana. It tells you how to recognize Nigraha Sthana, how when someone makes a mistake, repeatedly makes mistakes, deliberately makes mistakes, deliberately creates Vitandavad. So Pratipaksha Sthapana hi no Vitanda. They don't have their own position, but they just want to argue with you. Get rid of them. Okay? The audience should get rid of that person. I mean, these are the prescriptions. Okay? Occasions for rebuke, I just said. Sankhya Darshana, Patanjali Yoga Sutra, you would know the famous verse in Ekam Sankhyam Cha Yogam Cha Sapashyati Yapashyati. Here, you look at 3 Patanjali Yoga Sutra, Pratyaksha Anumana Agama Pramanani, Viparyayo Mithya Jnana Matadrupa Pratishtam, Shabda Jnananupati Vastu Shunyo Vikalpa. The reason I'm reading them is for this reason. They are in a continuous sequence. I was at one place, I won't mention the place, not that that's a secret, but in India, at a university, and I was saying this is wonderfully telling you the method of science, the method of getting to the truth. If you don't follow the method, what happens? And if you make a claim, but there is no supporting evidence, you create a delusion and confusion for yourself and delusion and confusion for the audience. Now, the first one is the truth. The second one is how you reach mithya jnana, meaning an error. And the third one is how you basically reach the confusion. Now, against this, just as for fun and comparison, look at the quote from Francis Bacon. He says, truth emerges quicker from error than confusion. If somebody makes a mistake, it's easy to point out did they use the scientific method or not. But what if someone keeps on claiming something and never bothers to show the evidence? That creates confusion for that person. It's very difficult to remove that. Okay, essentially in the same sequence that I showed you: the truth, error, and confusion. Okay. Now, who took it from who? If you want to figure that, I'm not saying that Francis Bacon took it from Patanjali's Yoga Sutra, but if at all, see, if it was the exactly opposite way. If there was evidence to show that this Patanjali is after Francis Bacon, like 16th, 17th century, immediately the Western people would jump and they said, Patanjali got it from Francis Bacon, I assure you. Okay, that's why the chronology is important. All right, I'll go fast, almost done. Okay, and the last one, Vedanta Darshan, it says, Tattu Samanvayat. That's what I call it, bring it all together. Which means what? If you want to summarize it, bringing this, some of you may know what this is. This is called Japanese principle called Ikigai. How many of you have heard Ikigai? Okay, so you're familiar. I'll go fast through this. What you love, what you're good at, what the world needs, and what you can be paid for. Okay, again that Amati Ikshuda Abhishastu. We need this. Now, I'm going to superimpose some of the principles from Bhagavad Gita, for example, or from Indian Siddhantas. So these are still Ikigai: passion, mission, profession, and vocation. Now let me superimpose something. Guna, karma, artha, dharma. Okay, the passion, like based on your guna karma, chaturvarnyam maya srishtam guna karma vibhagasha. Based on that, what you are good at, do that karma. But then some mission may drive you, like what the world needs. So you may change your profession. Like I went from chemical engineering to dating of Mahabharata or something like this. Okay, what the world needs and what you can be paid for. I have to still figure out the bottom one. Okay, how to get paid for this. But what does it give you? Okay, if you do something that you love and you are good at, you are going to get prasannata, a satisfaction, being content, and so on. If you have a mission, something that you love, and that's something you can get paid for, so to say, that becomes your duty, very natural duty. No confusion. And if you have something that you are good at, something that is needed, it will give you sustenance. Okay, the yoga kshema. And then, of course, the mukti, you don't have to necessarily try for it. If you do this, mukti will just happen. Like Tukarama says, mukta kasaya manave, bandatechi nahi thave. Okay, so if you are just totally engrossed in what you are doing, you don't have to worry about mukti as a separate thing. When you are eating, you don't have to worry, oh, what do I need to do still to feel satisfied? No, you just eat. Don't eat too much and you'll be satisfied, right? Something like this. So that's the definition of a sthita prajna. And then people ask, where is bhakti, where is jnana, where is karma? That's all there together. No matter which one you're doing, you need all of this. Quickly, last two slides. Wisdom. So how do we do this? Doesn't matter which field. If you want, so going for a past we discussed, what India did, what it was. What about the present and what about the future? The problems don't come to us in a packages, like this is a small problem, now solve it. The problems for each one of us are different wherever we are. But as a common methodology, this is what we should look at. If the Western methodology will look at a binary system of true or false, yes or no, pass or fail. And that's perfectly fine. It works in many places just fine. Okay, the Indian system, or if you have heard, very popular among Jains, for example, again the Indian system, is the Chatushkoti logic. True, both can be true and false. Neither true nor false, true or false. Okay, I just said Patanjali's Yoga Sutra. The first, the true here is what? Pratyakshanumana agama pramanani. That's how you get to the truth. Vipareyo mithyadnyanam atadrupa pratishtam. That's how you get to mithyadnyan, the error. Shabda jnananupati vastushunyo vikalpa. That's how you get to the confusion, delusion. Okay, and then Shraddha. Please, 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 we have to get out of Shraddha. I'm not asking you to reject Shraddha. Okay, for example, my work, I had a Shraddha that whatever is said in Mahabharata was at the time of the Mahabharata war. That was a Shraddha. There is no other basis for it. And then I strived for 15 years and finally I succeeded. There is a very good chance that I may not have succeeded. Okay, that was a tough time. I mean, I didn't feel it a tough time. But people look at you in a very different way. What is this crazy guy doing? Okay, when I published my first book, I tell that story all the time. My very close friend, he called me and he said, I heard you published a book on the dating of Mahabharata. Is it okay to tell my other friends that you are my friend? Okay, people absolutely, worry about their own reputation. So those all things will happen. But Shraddha is also of a different kind. Okay, just the Shraddha is not the end. In fact, it is the beginning. You cannot say, I have a Shraddha, therefore I accept it. Now, I will make one exception. In your own subjective, for your subjective conviction, for your own basis, say, I don't want to work all this. In my subjective conviction, I believe so and so thing happened. That's perfectly fine because it's not affecting other people. But when we take this Shraddha or Andhashraddha and start enforcing on other people, okay, what happens? We get the textbooks that we have. Okay, that is the problem. Okay, and then we just destroy generations. It's very difficult to take people on the other side. Okay, I'm done. I'll skip this. If it comes in a question answer, if you have a time, I'll do this. For example, the Indian text goes beyond the triangulation of science. In fact, Krishna is saying in the Bhagavad Puran, he's saying to Uddhava, he says the triangulation is not enough. He says, Shruti Pratyaksham Aitiyam Anumanam Chatushtayam. You must go for a quadrangulation of these four before accepting anything as a true. Pramaneshu Anavasthanat Vikalpat Savirajate. Otherwise, it will lead to confusion. It will lead to delusion. All right, I'm going to stop here. Questions and especially objections. Thank you.
So that was exhilarating, if not anything less. But so there are people around standing. If you have questions on your chits, so you can hand them over to my colleagues there. While Nilesh ji takes a small break, he can collect the questions and then shoot it at him. I think one of the most important things that came out, Nilesh ji, is how much less we know about ourselves. That you mentioned, and I was doing some work for one of our colleagues, and we were trying to figure out what is our past of the maritime history of India. And one of the interesting things that came out was that the U.S. national anthem was written on board one of the ships that was made by an Indian company in the 1800s. So the guy who wrote the U.S. anthem was actually, the ship that was built in India. So, these are things that we really don't know. And, there was also this other thing about how Indian ships were 10 times larger than the ship that Vasco da Gama traveled on when he came to India. We've also seen something about Rajendra Chola, the South Indian king, Tamil king, whose trade routes traveled right through Southeast Asia into China. And this was like so many years ago.
Yes.
And there's also that story about how Lord Nelson's ships were full of ships made out of Mumbai and erstwhile Bombay and Vizag ports.
Yes. Yeah, I didn't want to go to the Rigveda times. I mean, there are descriptions of ships in the Rigveda time. I didn't go for a specific reason that when those particular rucha comes, we cannot date it exactly, what they are. But there are descriptions of wonderful ships in the Rigveda itself.
Yeah.
Like the very word nav or navigation, and many of you may already know that, it has this origin in the Rigveda, Marathi nav, Many times it also happens, if you read Jnaneshwari, sometime you'll come across the words and, you say, that's a perfect Marathi word, But then I run into that same word in Rigveda. And I say, I thought that was Marathi. But actually it's a Sanskrit, Rigvedic Sanskrit, but it stayed as is in Marathi.
Okay, so I'll take a really an old question first. Okay, so there's this place near Badrinath. So I'm just reading out the question straight away. So there's a place near Badrinath named Mana, River Mana. Okay, Mana. River Saraswati is said to have originated from there. How did it dry up? You've written about that. Also, how does it cease to appear after a few meters in Mana village itself? So that was the question.
So what is the question again?
How did the river Saraswati dry up?
Saraswati dry up. Okay, I'll give you a quick history of Saraswati. Again, remember, science is about more likely versus less likely. Okay, we don't know all the answers to everything. This is a quick history of Saraswati. Again, those of you who may be, who may be thinking this or stuck in the ice age. Okay, it's a very heavy misunderstanding as it relates to India, that there was also ice age in India and it was not a livable conditions and so on. I think you mentioned it in your introduction. You can go back for 1-2 lakh years and India was just absolutely fine. There is enough evidence, okay? Actually, domestication of dogs is happening 60,000 years ago. There is a genetic evidence now and so on. But back to Saraswati. What the evidence that we have clearly tells us that definitely we have a wonderfully flowing Saraswati for last 90,000 years. So if you are thinking like the ice age, because of it started melting in 10,000, 12,000, 15,000, not correct. We have the path with lots of ample water in Saraswati for 90,000 years. So that was a Mahanadi. It became short suddenly. Let's not go into the reason because we don't know exactly what are the different things that happened around 22,000 BC. Okay, now the Saraswati, what is it? On the left side, or on the left side, you have the Satluj, which is the biggest river. On the right side, you have Yamuna. And in between the Kurukshetra region, there are 5-6 rivers, and there could be many other rivers, okay? And that's what formed the Saraswati. Yamuna separated from Saraswati, okay, as a tributary, separated from Saraswati sometime between 50,000 BC and 40,000 BC, and started meeting Yamuna. That also gives you upper limit for Ramayana, by the way. If you are stuck with Ramayana million years ago, or 8 million years ago, or whatever, 24 million years ago. Because Ramayana, Valmiki Ramayana describes Yamuna meeting Ganga, and that happened only after 50,000 years ago, based on the evidence we have. If the new evidence comes, contradicts this, we will change our thinking. Sanatano Nitya Nutana. Now you go back to 13,000, that is when Satluj Nadi sharply turned west and started flowing westward and no longer feeding its waters to Saraswati. Okay, so sometime after 13,000 or so, like the place Vinashan that you hear in the context of Saraswati actually might have existed after 13,000 BC. Sometime around 7,000 BC to 4,500 BC, there was a rejuvenation and intensification of monsoon that rejuvenated Saraswati. That is the time of Mahabharata. You see 200 plus descriptions of Saraswati. Many places it's flowing beautifully. Other places it has disappeared into the sands, like Rajasthan desert, right? Other places it's emerging from the sand. That's sometime between 7,000 BC, 4,500 BC. After that, the monsoon came back to normal levels or went down. And by 3,000 BC or 2,000 BC, and definitely by 2,000 BC, Saraswati was gone. That's a quick history of Saraswati.
Sorry. So there's been reference to medical science during Ramayana, specifically Ravana being portrayed as a great medicinal practitioner of that time. So your views on that?
Okay. So your mind what?
Your views on that?
My views. Okay. So what matters is what evidence we have, not my views. Okay. Not your views, not my views. So if you read Valmiki Ramayana, you will hear greatness of Ravana. To the best of my knowledge, I have not read in Valmiki Ramayana much about Ravana as a medicine man. So it could be from outside. It could be in Valmiki Ramayana. At least I have not come across it.
The other question that came up was that why is not enough documentation developed or available for all of these areas?
All of this period?
The past, basically.
Why there is not enough documentation? The question is, what is enough? Okay? I mean, when we are working in science, or especially history, we are like beggars, and beggars cannot be choosy. We have to do with what we have. What is amazing is, in fact, if you think of archaeology, what we find is like a 0.0000000000001% of actually what existed. Okay, it's amazing that with that little that we end up finding, what we can actually reconstruct the history. It's actually a glorious thing that is happening. So don't say like there is not enough evidence. No, because what would be evidence? Again, in science, there is most likely versus less likely. You will never have evidence when you will able to say, oh, now I feel satisfied. In your subjective conviction, you may or may not. But as an overall thing, we have to do with what evidence we have. In fact, in spite of all the burning of the libraries, Nalanda, Takshashila, whatever you would have heard, most of the loss of documentation because we did not care for them, still whatever is left, it's so much. If you want to study on it, or not just you as an individual, if thousands of us wants to study whatever is existing, it will take us few lifetimes. There is enough.
So do you think this knowledge should be made part of the history or other curriculum in schools and colleges, and how?
Say it again.
Do you think this
What
knowledge...
happens is when he speaks and you hear it, I get the echo.
Okay. Sorry. Do you think the knowledge should be made part of the history or other curriculum in schools and colleges?
Okay, should we make it? Yeah. Is that the question? Okay, of course. The answer is very obvious. You don't need me to give it to you. Now, maybe the real question is, Nilesh, why are you not doing it? Okay, many times that is the question. And I'll tell you, just as a metaphor, as a fun way I say it, in India, we will say it like do not smoke and do not spit, in the public places. In America, you will see do not smoke, but very rarely you will see do not spit. Okay, that doesn't mean the Americans should start spitting. That's not the idea. In their civic sense, they have the concept of not spitting unless you are on the baseball field. Okay, those of you who are watching it. My point is, we as a society, we have to build this. Okay, every one of us has to start talking to the other person, to the small groups, to your families, anytime you have a social meeting, weddings, and whatever, birthday parties, and so on. When that builds, the law will, the textbook will just change. Okay, there are many people, including myself, we actually give them, this is the text original, what should be modified, what should be kept as is, why, and when it is modified, how it should be modified with, why, meaning what's the evidence, and so on. Many people are doing it, you can participate, but everyone doesn't have to get to the textbook and write the text. Everyone may not be good at it. But Swadharma, right? Shreyan Swadharmo Viguna, whatever you are capable of, unless you do it, it will not happen. It's absolutely irresponsible and illogical to say why the politicians are not doing it, why Shri Modi ji is not doing it. If you do it, we have to give the document, we have to create the atmosphere, and it will just happen.
Yeah. So, when you were explaining about Surya Siddhanta, you shared an axis. The southern side of it was named Agastya. The southern side of that axis was named Agastya.
Huh.
Wish to know more about that is the question. So I don't know.
Okay, what do you want to know? So Agastya, the English name is a canopus. I don't know what the question is. So Agastya becomes like a pole star in the south. Okay, and it so happens that when Agastya becomes the pole star, Abhijit or Vega or Brahmarashi becomes the pole star in the north. But I didn't understand the question, so I don't know. So yeah, it does happen. Every 26,000 year approximately, it will become a pole star. Agastya will become a pole star in the south.
Last question. Is there anything about quantum physics in Indian scriptures or manuscripts?
Is there anything in the quantum physics about in the Indian scriptures? Now, good question. Now, there could be. For example, about relativity, many of you would know the story of the, what is that, marriage of, help me, Rohini, something like this. And, her dad is trying to find the right groom, and then goes to another Brahmaloka, Indraloka, whatever, right? And the dance is going on, okay? What do you call that in a Hindi movie? Item song. So the dance is going on, so you have to wait, until that is over. And so then he finally discusses with Indra or Brahma, whoever, forgive me, I don't remember the details. And he said, well, that's too late. Okay, here we are just waiting for 1 hour, but on earth, many generations have gone by. Okay, that's kind of the concept of a relativity theory. Does something exist in quantum mechanics? I don't know. But here is what Sir Karl Popper says, and that's why all these ancient Indian narratives or ancient narratives in general, not just, are very important. Do you know why? Because, his quote is very good. He says, science begins with the myths. Now, here you can use the word myths because he's using in a very different sense than what we are using as a mythology, by the way. Because myths means it's a combination of right and wrong, true and false. We don't know which one is true, which one is false. Science begins with the criticism of myths. Okay? And then what do? You criticize them to figure out what is right, what is wrong, what is true, what is false. So in that sense, we have to look at all ancient narratives, Indian narratives or otherwise, and there is a very likely chance, I won't assure you, that we may find things that get towards quantum mechanics. If you have read books like Fritjof Capra's, The Tao of Physics, or Gary Zukaw's Dancing Woolly Masters, how many of you have... yeah, very good, right? If you get into that, Dancing Woolly Masters, if you kind of start understanding this and Atma and whatnot, it will give you goosebumps. But it depends on what is your background, when you read that book. Otherwise, it can be very good, very bad book, I would say, or a good book for sleeping, So.
That's about it for questions. So.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Just so.
Done? Okay.
So, thank you, Nilesh ji. Many thanks for an extremely informative and thought-provoking speech. I'm sure we are all the more richer than when we arrived at the venue today evening. Like I said, my own brief exposure to maritime past. So um, what comes to mind? What comes to mind is that no student of world affairs can ignore the importance of India. And in many ways, India's past and the present holds the key, I would say. Typically we explore the relevance of the past to the present, but I think that's not enough. We need to start looking at it with the future in mind. How does the past and the present both influence the future? I think that's what is important for us to now look at. Typically, we've been brought up, and our basic nature is to romanticize the past, and I think that's has to change a little bit, and we have to take more stronger efforts to remove the distortions that are there in both in our own understanding and our own the way that we've been teaching people and we've been taught and our future generations. And I think that's the crux of what Nilesh has mentioned to us today. Typically, we are always inclined, because of the Western view of India, that India is all about spirituality, yoga, meditation, and things like that. Yeah, that's all right. But that's more to us, more to India and more to Bharat than all of these cliched topics. I think not just the world, but even us, we ourselves know so less about ourselves. Okay, that it's time we expanded our minds. I'm sure Nileshji's work in this area will do a lot of push, and he has a very vibrant YouTube channel. If you look at it, I will tell you that it's dangerous because you can't stop with viewing one video a day. You'll probably end up spending nights. So you already did that. So there's so you get stuck on that, absolutely. And he also has a very popular Twitter handle. So you should look at that. And I think what's important, what I see is that it will revive a lot of interest in our epics. Okay, not as myths but as history, and that's very important. And probably, I risk saying this, okay, that it will probably lend credence to the epics as the discovery of Troy did to Homer's Iliad. So that's something that's very important. So thank you very much, Nileshji. I really, on behalf of Vishwa Adhyayan Kendra, Keshav Srishti, and SP Mandli, we were very happy that you were able to find time and spend a couple of hours with us. I would like to thank all the trustees of SP Mandli, the management of V School, Suresh Devleji, he's not here, but he couldn't make it here. Professor Dr. Uday Salunke, who's the Dean of, Director of Wellinkar College, Captain Kanade and his team, Vishwas Marathe and his team, Rokhde and his team, the auditorium operations team, thank you very much for a really smooth operation. The volunteers of the organizing teams of both Keshav Srishti, V School and VAK. And most importantly, you mentioned it, the vada pavs are very important. So the thanks to the caterers as well. And without everybody's cooperation and coordination, this program wouldn't have been as successful. Finally, I invite Naren to, if you started something with a Vedic chant, you should end it again with that. Okay, so I invite Naren for a Vedic chant, after which we'll close the program after singing the national anthem.
Ayam nijha paro veti gananam lahu chetasam udara charita nam tu vasudhaiva kutumbakam.
Can you please stand for the national anthem, please? Thank you.
Janagana mana adhinayak jaya he Bharat bhagya vidhata Punjab Sindh Gujarat Maratha Dravida उत्कलबङ्गा विन्ध्य हिमाचल यमुना गङ्गा उच्छल जलधितरङ्गा तव शुभ नामे जागे तव शुभ आशीष माघे गाहे तव जय गाथा जन गण मंगलुधायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता जय हे जय हे जय हे जय 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 हे भारत माता की भारत माता की भारत माता की